What happens when a British royal steps into the lion's den of American journalism, expecting courtesy, but finding confrontation instead? You're about to find out. When Prince Harry sat down with George Stephanopoulos on Good Morning America, he expected a friendly chat about the Invictus Games, not the most bruising interview of his career. Before we dive in, make sure you hit subscribe and drop a comment below, because you won't believe what happens when royal privilege collides with hard-edged American journalism, in what became a live, televised meltdown. The tension was obvious the moment Harry stepped onto the GMA set. What should have been a quick promotional stop for his veterans' charity turned into something far more explosive. Stephanopoulos, sharp, seasoned, and notoriously unflinching, was clearly prepared for battle. As the lights blazed and the cameras rolled, millions of viewers were about to witness an on-air confrontation that would leave the Duke of Sussex visibly shaken and questioning why he ever agreed to appear. The opening pleasantries lasted by 47 seconds. "Prince Harry, thank you for joining us," Stephanopoulos began, his trademark smile firmly in place. But those familiar with him could see the difference, a glint in his eyes that signaled this wasn't going to be a soft interview. Harry, dressed in his usual relaxed business attire, smiled back, confident and composed. He had no idea what was coming. "Let's start with the Invictus Games," Stephanopoulos began, "but I think our viewers are more interested in something else entirely. Your recent comments about the American media have caused quite a stir, especially your claim that U.S. journalists lack the sophistication of their British counterparts." Harry's smile faltered. This was not the agreed topic. His team had briefed him for charity talk, not media controversy. "Well, George," he began carefully, "I think there's been some misunderstanding. My comments were taken a bit out of context." Stephanopoulos leaned forward slightly, the unmistakable signal that the gloves were coming off. "The context seemed pretty clear," he said evenly. "You told the Los Angeles Times that American journalists tend to sensationalize rather than inform, and that they lack the historical understanding British reporters bring to royal coverage." That's a direct quote. Harry's jaw tightened. The easy charm slipped. "I think you're simplifying it," he replied. "I was just pointing out that there are differences between media traditions. That's all." "Differences," Stephanopoulos repeated. "You called American journalism shallow. For someone who's built a new life here, who's profited enormously from American platforms, that sounds a little hypocritical, doesn't it?" The word hung in the air, like a challenge. Harry shifted in his seat, gripping the armrests slightly tighter. "I wouldn't call it hypocrisy," he said. "I'm uniquely positioned to observe both media cultures. I've experienced both, quite extensively." Stephanopoulos saw the opening and went in harder. "Uniquely positioned," he echoed. "Let's talk about that position. You've earned millions from Netflix and Spotify deals, book sales, and countless TV appearances, all facilitated by the same American media you've criticized. So, if it's so flawed, why keep coming back?" The studio was silent but for the faint hum of the cameras. Harry's tone sharpened. "You're oversimplifying again, George. My comments weren't about individuals. They were about systemic differences in how stories are told." "Systemic differences," Stephanopoulos repeated almost to himself, then struck. "Like the systematic invasion of your mother's privacy by British tabloids, the same system that hounded her to the brink and ultimately led to her death? Those systemic differences." Harry froze. The air in the studio changed. Everyone, the crew, the producers, even the audience, felt the temperature drop. Stephanopoulos had gone there. For a long, unbearable second, Harry said nothing. His jaw worked, but no words came. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, tight with restrained anger. "That's crossing a line, George." But Stephanopoulos didn't flinch. So were the tabloids. "But we're not talking about them right now. We're talking about you and the contradictions in how you've chosen to engage with the media you claim to distrust." The Duke's composure was cracking. His PR armor, polished, practiced, invincible, was starting to fracture under the relentless precision of a man who'd spent decades questioning presidents. And the night was just getting started. That's exactly the kind of sensationalism I was talking about, Harry shot back, his voice rising. Bringing up my mother's death just to score points on live television. This is precisely what I meant about the lack of nuance in the American media. Stephanopoulos didn't flinch. His tone remained calm, his expression unreadable. I'm not being sensational, Prince Harry. I'm pointing out the irony. You've spent years condemning the British press for how they treated your family, rightly so in many cases. But now you're criticizing the American media, the very system that's given you a platform to tell your story, on your own terms. Doesn't it seem a little contradictory to attack the machine that helped rebuild your public image? The tension in the studio was thick enough to cut. Harry's polished media armor was cracking, and Stephanopoulos knew it. Every question landed with surgical precision. You don't understand the full picture, Harry said, his frustration finally surfacing. There are complexities here that go beyond what you're implying. Yes, the American press has been fairer to me, but that doesn't mean I can't point out differences in journalistic standards and integrity. Journalistic standards? Stephanopoulos repeated, leaning forward. Let's talk about those. Is it within journalistic standards to condemn an entire country's media while simultaneously profiting from it? Is it standard practice to bite the hand that feeds you while asking for seconds? Harry's eyes narrowed. The exchange was no longer polite. It was personal. Stephanopoulos pressed on, his voice measured but razor-sharp. You've been open about your mental health struggles, and I respect that. But you've also monetized those struggles through book deals, streaming contracts, and speaking engagements worth millions. How do you reconcile your criticism of media exploitation with your own willingness to commercialize your trauma? The question hit like a hammer. Harry's face flushed crimson. For a moment, he looked genuinely stunned. This was no longer a discussion, it was a dismantling. That's completely different, Harry stammered, his composure fraying. Sharing my story to help others isn't the same as being exploited. I've been transparent about what I've gone through because I want to break down stigma and encourage people to seek help. Stephanopoulos nodded slightly, but his tone remained ice-cold, transparent perhaps, but also profitable. Your book advance alone was estimated at $40 million. Your Netflix deal? Over $100 million. Those aren't charitable acts, Prince Harry, they're business transactions. You're selling your pain, your family's secrets, and your royal connections to the highest bidder, while condemning others for doing exactly the same thing. A hush fell over the studio. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate. Harry's hands were visibly shaking now. The smooth, carefully rehearsed media persona he'd perfected since leaving royal life was unraveling before millions of viewers. You're twisting everything I've said, he snapped. I never claimed my work was purely charitable. There's a huge difference between telling your story and having it stolen, twisted, and weaponized by tabloids that don't care about the truth. Is there? Stephanopoulos countered instantly. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're doing precisely what you accused them of. Taking private family moments, intimate conversations, and deeply personal details about people who can't respond, and turning them into global entertainment. The only difference is that you've cut out the middleman. Harry's jaw clenched. A vein pulsed at his temple. That's not fair, George. My father and brother have every advantage imaginable. They've got the entire British establishment behind them. I've been vilified and silenced for years. Silenced? Stephanopoulos' eyebrows lifted slightly. You've been on more American talk shows in 3 years than most A-listers manage in a decade. You've published a best-selling memoir. You host your own podcast, and you've sat for interviews with Oprah, Netflix, and now me. If this is what being silenced looks like, Prince Harry, I think a lot of people would like to try it. The air in the studio crackled. This was no longer a conversation, it was open warfare, live on morning television. Both men seemed to forget they were on live television. The studio lights burned hot, but it was the rising tension between them that made the air feel electric. Prince Harry was no longer the polished, media-savvy figure who had strolled onto the set an hour earlier. The calm confidence was gone, replaced by defensiveness, irritation, and, most dangerously for his image, a whiff of entitlement. You don't understand what it's like, Harry snapped, his voice taking on a sharp, almost pleading tone that made him sound more petulant than sympathetic. You have no idea what it's like to have your entire life dissected, to have every word twisted, to be under attack every single day. Stephanopoulos leaned back in his chair, and for the first time, he smiled. But it wasn't the polite kind. It was the smile of a man who knew he had just cornered his guest. "Actually, Prince Harry," he said evenly, "I do know what that's like. I spent years in the White House during some of the most controversial moments in modern American politics. I've been attacked by both parties, had my integrity questioned, my motives shredded. The difference is, I didn't flee the country and spend years complaining about it on television." The comparison landed like a gut punch. Everyone in the studio knew it. Harry, once framed as the victim of forces beyond his control, now stood exposed as a man being confronted with uncomfortable truths. "That's completely different," Harry protested, though his voice lacked conviction. "You chose to enter politics. I was born into this. I never had a choice." "Neither did your brother," Stephanopoulos replied instantly, "or your father, or your grandmother for that matter. They faced the same scrutiny, the same expectations. The difference is they stayed. They did their duty, you left, and then wrote a book about how hard it was." He paused, letting the silence tighten around them. "So tell me, who really lacks character here?" The words hit like a death sentence. Harry opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His composure, his training, his carefully built American reinvention, none of it could save him now. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost trembling. "I think you're being deliberately unfair and hostile." "This isn't journalism, George. This is a personal attack." Stephanopoulos didn't blink. "This is journalism, Prince Harry. This is what accountability looks like. You've spent years giving friendly interviews, controlling your narrative, avoiding hard questions. But your reaction right now tells us everything we need to know about why you really left the royal family." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Harry's eyes widened. The mask was gone. For a brief, unguarded moment, viewers saw not the victim, not the prince, but a man on the edge. "You want to know why I really left?" he said, his voice quivering with rage. "It's because of people like you. Journalists who think they can judge every decision, twist every word, and pretend they know better than the people actually living it." Stephanopoulos folded his hands calmly on the desk. "So it wasn't about racism in the royal family, or your mental health, or protecting your wife and children. It was about avoiding scrutiny, about not wanting to be held accountable. The accusation was gasoline on fire." Harry's control shattered. The transformation was complete. Gone was the carefully managed empathy, replaced by unfiltered anger. "Accountability?" he shouted, his voice echoing through the studio. "Accountability to whom? To you? To people who've never lived a single day in my shoes? I don't owe anyone an explanation for the choices I made to protect my family and my sanity." "Actually," Stephanopoulos replied, rising slowly from his chair, "you do. You owe it to the British people who supported your family for decades, to the American audiences who've given you a platform to rebuild your image, and most of all, to the family members you've publicly shamed for profit." Harry's chair clattered backward as he stood abruptly, his face flushed, his fists clenched. The crew froze. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate. "This is exactly what I mean," Harry shouted. "This hostile, sensationalist style that passes for journalism in America. You're not looking for truth, you're chasing ratings." For the first time, Stephanopoulos allowed himself a small, cold smile. "And you're not advocating for mental health, Prince Harry. You're rehabilitating your image and making millions while doing it. The difference between us?" He leaned in slightly. "I'm honest about what I'm doing." The line hit like a thunderclap. Harry stood motionless, breathing hard. His entire narrative, the polished interviews, the brand of vulnerability and virtue, was collapsing in real time. "I don't have to listen to this," he said finally, his voice shaking with fury. "I don't have to sit here and be attacked by someone who came into this with an agenda. This isn't journalism. It's character assassination." Stephanopoulos rose to meet his eye, his tone level and unyielding. "No, Prince Harry," he said. "This is journalism, when the subject can't control the narrative." The words hung in the air as the cameras rolled, capturing the precise moment the Duke of Sussex's composure, and perhaps his credibility, finally broke. "This," Stephanopoulos said evenly, "is what accountability feels like. when you can't buy your way out of difficult questions. And your reaction right now proves exactly why you really left the royal family. Harry's face flushed crimson. His hands balled into fists at his sides. My reaction, he shot back, voice trembling with anger, is to being ambushed by a journalist who clearly has no interest in fair reporting. You've twisted everything I've said, taken my words out of context, and turned what should have been a conversation about helping veterans into a personal attack. I've asked you direct questions about your own statements and actions, Stephanopoulos countered smoothly. If hearing your own words feels like a personal attack, perhaps you should ask yourself why they sound so damaging when repeated back to you. That did it. The composure shattered. The calm, camera-trained version of Prince Harry vanished. Viewers were now watching something they'd never seen before, a British royal unraveling in real time. You know what, George? Harry snapped, rising abruptly from his chair. This interview is over. I don't need this. I don't need you. I came here in good faith to discuss serious issues, and you've turned it into a circus. The only person turning it into a circus is you. Stephanopoulos replied calmly. I've asked fair questions about your public life and your business dealings. Your inability to answer them professionally says everything about your character and your fitness for public life. Harry froze mid-stride, his anger boiling over. My fitness for public life? He repeated, incredulous. I've done more for charity and service than you ever will. I served my country in Afghanistan while you were sitting safely behind a desk, lobbing softball questions at politicians. The jab was meant to wound, but Stephanopoulos didn't even blink. You served your country, yes, he said evenly. For 10 weeks, on a heavily fortified base with more protection than most soldiers ever see. And then, like everything else, you left when it became inconvenient or difficult. Harry spun around, his expression twisted with fury. How dare you minimize my military service? I put my life on the line for my country while you were probably at cocktail parties in Washington. Your service was admirable, Stephanopoulos acknowledged, his tone still infuriatingly calm. But it doesn't buy you immunity from criticism. And it doesn't excuse your behavior since. You can't keep invoking your 10 weeks in Afghanistan every time someone questions your multi-million-dollar media deals. Harry's hands were shaking now, his voice rising with each word. This is unbelievable. This is exactly the kind of toxic media environment I've been talking about. You've just proven my point better than I ever could. Actually, Stephanopoulos said, folding his hands, I think I've proven mine. You can handle friendly interviews with soft questions, but not real journalism. You can dish out criticism, but you fall apart the moment anyone holds you accountable. Harry was now at the edge of the set, yanking at his microphone pack while a technician scrambled to assist. I'm done with this farce, he shouted. Done with so-called journalists who think ambush tactics and character assassination are professional. And I think, Stephanopoulos said, his voice carrying just enough edge to cut through the noise, the American public is done with entitled celebrities who think they deserve special treatment. The words landed like a hammer blow. Harry finally tore off the mic, his face still flushed with fury. You can edit this however you want, George, he spat. People will see through your agenda. You turned a respectful conversation into a hit job. Stephanopoulos didn't even turn in his chair. We're live, Prince Harry, he said. There's no editing. The world just saw exactly what happened. A man who can attack others but can't handle being questioned. Who runs the moment he loses control of the narrative? Harry froze at the studio door, his hand gripping the handle. For a fleeting second, it looked like he might turn around and fight back. Instead, he shook his head, muttered something under his breath, and walked out. The sound of the studio door closing echoed through the silent set. Stephanopoulos straightened his tie and faced the camera. Composure utterly intact, well, he said calmly, that was certainly illuminating. Sometimes the most revealing interviews are the ones where the guest reveals more than they intended. He looked directly into the lens. We'll be right back after this break. As the cameras faded to black, the studio crew stood frozen in disbelief. They all knew what had just happened. They hadn't just filmed an interview. They had witnessed the implosion of Prince Harry's carefully crafted American persona. His media strategy, built on control, sympathy, and image management, had just gone up in flames, live, unfiltered, and unrecoverable. It was, without question, the moment that changed everything.